2020, where we're going to get a sort of annual report of what the Ohio Digital Network has been up to, as well as DPLA at the national level. I'm Evan Struble. I'm the Associate State Librarian for Library Development at the State Library of Ohio. I am so fortunate to oversee the Department Library Programs and Development, under which the Ohio Digital Network resides, and I'm even more pleased to get to brag on some staff members that are just fantastic. They don't know that I'm going to do this, but I'm actually going to read their bios, because why not? They're speakers too, right? So indulge me. Here we go. With us today, we have Jen Johnson and Penelope Shoemaker, and here are their bios. So Jen Johnson is the digitization consultant in library programs and development at the State Library of Ohio. Imagine that. She is the project coordinator of the Ohio Digital Network. Before joining the State Library in 2013, she worked in special, public, and academic libraries. Before she could drive a car, she started a community library in her parents' garage. Way to go, Jen. I'm not surprised at that at all. We also have Penelope Shoemaker. Penelope is the metadata librarian at the State Library of Ohio. She prepares the metadata for the Ohio Digital Network. And before working with us at the State Library, she worked at public and special libraries and as a middle and high school English educator. When she's not working, she enjoys visiting historical landmarks and parks. And I do want to take a moment to introduce kind of a stealth member of the ODN team who is helping me behind the scenes moderate the chat today, and that's Peter Kukla. Peter has been working in and with libraries since he was in high school. After getting his MLS at Indiana University, Peter worked in public and academic libraries before falling into the software world. He worked at OCLC, supporting librarians using Content DM system before coming to the State Library of Ohio, where he works in our information systems and technology department. And we could not do this without him. So thank you, Peter, for being a part of this with us today. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jen and Penelope to give us a little bit of an update as to what has been going on with ODN. Jen, Penelope, take it away.
Thank you, Evan, and also thanks to Peter too. I do want to say a shout out to Peter, who has been behind the scenes today and supporting all of the work that we've been doing pretty much since we started. So as Evan said, this is our annual report session of ODN Fest. We're going to talk about some of the projects we've been working on and some of the things we're looking forward to working on. And let's go ahead and get started. Next slide, please, Penelope. So I just want to do a quick overview of the status of the ODN governance model. When we started, it was a little bit bigger and there were a couple of tweaks, but it's been pretty similar to the way that we left it with those tweaks just a few years ago. Obviously the ODN staff, which would be Peter Kukla, Penelope Shoemaker, and myself, overseen by Evan Struble and Wendy Knapp. And our executive committee that meets about once or twice a year, made up of Wendy Knapp, Amy Pawlowski from Ohio Link, Jillian Ramage from Ohio History Connection, and Don Yarman of Oakland fame. We also still have our community engagement centers. This is a team that meets about quarterly, about 4 times a year, with representatives from each institution type that participates in ODN or that may want to participate in ODN and DPLA. So John DeWeese representing public libraries right now, Aaron Kilkenny from Ohio Link for academic libraries, and Jenny Solomon for special libraries, museums, and historical societies as well. So this community engagement center is designed to be another outreach communication channel with partners and contributors in the community. If you have questions and you happen to catch them somewhere, not really in a hallway like we would have last year, but if you do happen to catch them, they're happy to answer your questions about ODN and forward any questions or concerns on to us. Next, please. We also still have our fantastic DigiHubs. You may remember as part of our planning grant process to become part of DPLA, we were able to use some LSTA grant money to outfit some, 4 area libraries with scanning and scanners and technology to support the needs of digital collections and libraries and other special collections in their areas if they weren't able to do the work themselves. So we've got Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library Cleveland Public Library, Columbus Metropolitan Library, and Toledo Lucas County Public Library as well. So this is great if your institution maybe doesn't have the scanning technology, doesn't want to buy a big scanner for one project. You can work with these folks at these libraries, you know, whoever's closest to you, maybe reach out to them first, or even if you just have questions about your metadata, they've got staff in place who can support you there. I'm also so happy to continue work with our outreach working group. Jenny Solomon of OHC is the chair. Janet Carlton, John DeWeese, Virginia Dressler, and Emily Reineman, Adam Wanter, and Aliyah LeVar-Wegner have done some great project work that we're going to talk about next. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of a year in review for the projects that we've been working on. And first, in the beginning of the year, when everything seemed so different from how it is now, you might remember hearing about our launch of our primary source sets curated by outreach working group members. We've got 8 Ohio-based sets right now that include additional resources, teaching guides, and discussion questions and classroom activities. These are modeled after the primary source sets that you would find on DPLA's website, but focused specifically on Ohio Digital Network content. So you'll find these linked on the Ohio Digital Network website, but the items do link back out to DPLA. And I think on the next slide, we have a little bit of a video to show exactly what that looked like. Nope, I skipped ahead on myself. Right here, we've got the URL and we've got a list of the primary source sets. You can see we've got 8 here and we're hoping to have more in the future. Pretty wide range of topics. African-American Ohioans in the arts, all the way down to women's suffrage and the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, with some manufacturing and some geography and some other person-centered history, as well as climate change history in the mix. Go ahead and next, please. And I think if you, when somebody else is doing the slides, yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you. Wasn't sure how that would work. Thanks, Penelope. You can see here just an example of what these primary source sets look like. We've got standards listed if they were available. We've got coverage of time periods and links that go down to the specific area. This particular set is organized by the individual who was important in the arts in Ohio, with, you can see contributions, citations, little thumbnails, and links back out to DPLA, where the student or the educator could then go back to your collection directly. And these ended up being perfect timing with school being at home, work being at home, a lot of learning taking place, learning of all kinds taking place at home. We did see a pretty good increase in our numbers for these digital collections starting in April. We've even got some links to some videos here, and you can see the teaching guides and discussion questions and classroom activities are downloadable PDFs. The additional resources also vary. Sometimes it's more questions, sometimes it's links out to further resources. Next, please. One more, there we go. And then came March, and you can insert your own record scratch noise here for our plans and our workloads shifting and changing. But on the next slide, we can see that in April, we were able to kind of pick the baton back up, and I was greatly inspired by DPLA's webinar that you've heard about earlier today, the Wikimedia Commons project, and that John DeWeese has been working on also since this spring. We did go ahead and host a summer series of overview of Wikimedia Foundation projects, platforms, history, development, and ways to edit content that's on there or add content. And we will be looking forward to the future, working with some of that back-end technology to be able to link the ODN collections directly right onto Wikimedia Commons, the way you've seen Toledo's work and the way you've seen others that Dominic has talked about for DPLA. Right now, we do have 20 institutions in Ohio with eligible collections. That would be basically content that's already in DPLA that is in the public domain. And I've reached out to some of these institutions to see about further research and working on how we can work with those collections. If you have already heard from me, that's great. If you have questions, please let me know, and you might be hearing from us in the future too. Next, please. Over the summer, we talked a little bit more with our fine friends at Oakland. If you're in a public library, you're probably pretty familiar with Oakland. Otherwise, you might not be. Oakland is the Ohio Public Library Information Network. They are an independent part of the State Library of Ohio. And the second point here, supports Ohio's 251 public libraries, is probably the understatement of the year. The internet connections, the website support, a lot of the technology support, that these public libraries use for their staff, for the work that they do, but then also for all the patrons that come in and use the services as well. The internet services and database services, Oakland supports that. Oakland has a major hand in that. And another part of their work is being part of the Libraries Connect Ohio group to support the subscription and the purchase of several databases that Ohio Public Library patrons can access through the Ohio Web Library. Next slide, please. And working with Oakland staff, we are so excited to announce that DPLA is now listed as one of the Ohio Web Library resources that is automatically listed and available to any of your patrons that are using the library, either in the library if you have in-person browsing, or at home from their own computers. As we remember, DPLA does not require any sort of registration or library card to access. It is I'll say lowercase s subscription service, in that the State Library of Ohio does pay a subscription model to participate in it, but your library and your patrons do not have to pay for the access. We're paying for it. And so we want to make sure that as many people use it as possible. And this link on the Ohio Web Library page actually goes right to the Ohio Digital Networks collection. So it's a head start for anybody who's looking for Ohio related content on DPLA. Next, please. And earlier, we've also earlier this summer been working on a digital collection survey. We had started this earlier before that record scratch slide, got a little waylaid with some other projects and technical infrastructure questions, but happy to announce that we will be launching the digital collection survey for Ohio on World Digital Preservation Day, November 5th. Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the hashtag, but I thought I'd put it up there anyway. And Melba Roy, a NASA computer, when a computer was a person and not an object, clearly getting ready to take her survey to report the state of her digital collections and her digital preservation plans. We're going to be sending that out in the beginning of November, closing it at the end of the year, and able to share that data with the rest of the state in early 2021. Next slide, please. Speaking of data, data is in the news, and analytics are everywhere you look these days when it comes to continuing education and programming and library land. So we have at Ohio Digital Network been tracking analytics and data for our content in DPLA for a while. Subscribers to the ODN listserv may be familiar with the sometimes pithy, sometimes entertaining, but always educational monthly report that we do send out with statistics of the usage of items on DPLA and our most popular items. We've also been doing our own tracking and reports for meetings and committees, but wondering what more we can do with that data. And so our first step in what we're going to do with that data is on the next slide. Again, also very happy to announce something else. We're going to be launching a Ohio Digital Network Analytics dashboard as part of the ODN site. You'll find it in the menu under the Contributors tab. And I think this is actually an animation too, a quick video just to show what's on there. Yep, thanks Penelope. We've just got a couple little graphs here right now. This is driven from Google Analytics, and you can see ODN item usage on DPLA and total items in DPLA, and then also our cumulative statistics, which would be year to year. We've been contributing for a couple years now, so we're amassing enough data to really notice trends. And it's great to see this upward trend in contributors and total items on DPLA. That red one there in the middle, the total usage. It's not actually down for 2020. We just haven't finished 2020 yet. So far, we're actually tracking to be a little bit higher. So that's going to be good news as well. We like to see those bar charts and columns go up and to the right. And right there, you can see that URL at the bottom of the page if you want to check it out. Go ahead, next, please. And yes, more specifically into 2020 usage to date. As of our last harvest that we did, I think about a week and a half ago, Penelope can check me there if I'm wrong, we've got 234,887 items on DPLA. And as of 2020, those items have been used almost 10,000 times. The difference here in these little sub points here, Ohio events and click-throughs. Ohio events is anytime an item on DPLA is accessed, it's clicked on, you know, the picture of Ruby D or Art Tatum. And then the click-through is when the person who's using the site actually clicks on, you know, view full item and goes back to Cleveland Public Library, goes back to Cincinnati Public Library, Hamilton County. So there's a little bit of a distinction there, but added up together, it's the total ODN item usage on DPLA. Next, please. And I just wanted to give a shout out to all of our contributors to date. We do still have a couple in process right now with organizations who have signed their contributor agreement and are working on their metadata, working very closely with Penelope and Peter to get those items harvested. This is our current contributor list to date, and you can find more information on their specific collections on the ohiodigitalnetwork.com site that's listed there on the slide. And I think, Penelope, we're handing it over to you now, right?
Yes.
Great, so, thank you so much.
We're just going to start out with just finishing up what Jen was talking about. Here are our top 4 items of 2020, and they're long DPLA links if you want to go find them. The easiest way, though, is to search by their title. Ohio History Connection has really won this year, although you might notice that the first one has about 400 views, and then there's a lot of items that have about 50 to 60 views in our collection. So there's a lot that are close. So just wanted to give you an idea of what is getting viewed. Now some news from the metadata front. So the first thing is that we are updating our standardized right statement field. We're now allowing Creative Commons licenses. When we started at DPLA, they were working towards the idea that they want these rights fields to be standard and the same, so that when a user approaches DPLA, they really understand how they can use their items. So what that means is that the 12 standardized right statements are changed and put into DPLA. You put that URL, excuse me, I got a slight interruption from a small person. Anyway, so those standardized right statements, there's a URL that you put in, or URI, and then it's changed on DPLA's site to put some plain language so that a user, if they're in middle school or whether they're just someone who's tripped across DPLA on the web, really knows if they can reproduce your item or not. Now, in some cases, a Creative Commons license might also work. And with the standardization in DPLA, at the time that we were brought on, we have been able to have 100% compliance with standardized right statement just because of our timing. Now, there are older users in DPLA that have a mix of items, and so they're working to get everything kind of backlogged done, but obviously they're working with their contributors differently because they already had items in DPLA. We do want to caution when you're using a Creative Commons license that you are making sure that you are using it correctly. Some people we have seen just want to use a license and maybe they're not the creator of the work. And a lot of those licenses are meant to be put on by the creator, and the right statement really helps you use that more effectively. The next thing is Peter kind of hinted at this and talked in much more technical detail than I'm going to in the Wikimedia session, so 2 sessions ago, about IIIF testing. We're working with Content DM mostly because it's our largest contributor, and Peter has some background knowledge in Content DM to see if we can figure out how to get those IIIF links in our metadata, perhaps without even having to have you add it, so that you can get into Wikimedia Commons if your items are eligible. But right now we're hitting a few roadblocks, but hopefully soon we'll have more updates there. And the next thing is, along with some of the things that DPLA has been doing as a network whole, we are working on considering how to make sure that our metadata is correctly and sensitively created. So sometimes there are some terms that are old that ends up in metadata that might be harmful to people, and how can you update your metadata? How do you use standardized vocabularies that may have harmful and terms in them, and what are the best practices. And so we're working on trying to figure out some trainings, and we're going to have more information in 2021. Next, I want to tell you all, if you're not already in DPLA, about a wonderful opportunity for you. We have our Metadata Mini-Grant that is up to $499 in LSTA funds for the remediation of metadata and to create digital collections for DPLA. So it's open to all cultural heritage institutions in Ohio, as long as you don't already have collections in DPLA. So that's only about 26 of you are not eligible. The rest of you in Ohio, please apply. You can use these funds to pay for digitization or to pay someone to fix your metadata so that it's ready for DPLA. You can't use it to buy any equipment, but you can pay someone else to do digitization. What we're trying to target is those smaller institutions that maybe you don't have someone on staff, but you could hire someone to fix up one collection so that you can be represented in DPLA. The applications do close on November 2nd. If you have any questions, we did have a webinar last week that you can go and watch. We have the recording, or you can email Jen or I or Cindy Boyden, who has been wonderful in helping us get that grant up and running. Lastly, I wanted to share some of the work that I've been doing with the DPLA network. I served on the IDEAS Task Force, which stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access and Social Justice Task Force. We created a statement to help inform some of DPLA's future work as the network and also as DPLA as a whole. So you can read that statement on the link there. It really helped provide some of their groundwork, although they were already working on the Black women's suffrage, but the ideas behind it and making sure that we as a network and contributors to the DPLA are working towards these goals together. In addition to that, when that was complete, I am one of the co-chairs of the Metadata Working Group for this 2-year term. We wrote the harmful language statement for the Black women's suffrage collection. We took what Audrey had written, a very lovely draft, and we added a little bit of information to it and refined it to help users understand who may not know library terms or things that the way that metadata ends up in a collection, how it gets there, or why people preserve history in the way they do, and hopefully giving users an understanding of the collection and how they're experiencing it, as well as an open invitation to, if they find something harmful, to talk to DPLA, and then we could talk to the contributors to help update it so that it's the best that it can be. And now we're ready for questions.
So I've been keeping an eye on the chat box while Penelope and Jen were speaking. I didn't see any questions come through. I did see a fantastic pumpkin photo shared by Derek Zolads to the group. What questions do we have for Penelope and Jen? If you want to throw those into the chat box, we'll be sure to ask them. Jen, Penelope, I'm not sure if you're able to see the chat box at this point.
I cannot.
I
Okay,
can
that's
see
fine.
it. Penelope, you
Okay.
can stop sharing if you want to. I don't care.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks like a question just came in from Anna Marie. She says she's curious about the metadata changes or considerations in the slides.
Anna, did you have a specific question about those changes? Are you talking about the contentious metadata or about our adding of IIIF and if you want, I believe you can unmute yourself if you are tired of typing.
She said,
yes, sorry, I think we forgot to say that. You have the ability to unmute or show your face should you decide to do that. Do you need an alibi maybe? Show your face.
Yeah, I'm not going to show my face right now since you're recording. But yeah, I'm very interested in the contentious metadata changes and the IIIF, particularly because at Ohio State University Libraries, we are looking at hopefully sharing our content or a selection of our content with Ohio Digital Network in the foreseeable future. And of course, I would love to be appraised of what those potential changes are, and I think others might be interested.
So the IIIF, I'll go to that one first, is that we will be adding a field that DPLA already has in their map v5. The question is how will that field be populated? What we are hoping to do is be able to do that automatically, and Peter would be able to speak more about how that would work. However, it depends on the you're using and whether the technology cooperates. And so far, we're just experimenting and hoping that it works in the future. For the contentious metadata, what we would like to do is, that's just in the very early stages. Like I said, I've participated in some task force with DPLA, is trying to our partners about how to update your metadata. At the same time, that doesn't mean that I'm going to look at your metadata and tell you that you're doing it wrong. It's a field that we're trying to make sure, obviously if there was something I found, I would alert you, but I'm not an expert in that, but we're trying to make sure that we're being thoughtful and considerate in anything that could be a carryover from old cataloging, or that maybe isn't a good description, and how to make that better. So what I would like to start with is bringing in some experts maybe to talk about it, and then having conversations with our partners. Does that answer your questions?
Well, it was a little vague. I was interested in the specific metadata elements that were being referred.
Well, we're just referring to adding a IIIF field. So we already, like DPLA's map already has it, and we will have it on our end. The other metadata is not a field that's going to be added, but just looking at how you're creating your metadata to make sure that it is the best that it can be.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Penelope or Jen?
Any requests for 2021 programming? Give it to us now. We'll throw it up on the calendar.
All right, I did my count to 10, giving everyone a chance to really cogitate and think it over. I see no questions at this time. Certainly that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions going forward. If you think of anything after the fact, please drop me a line, drop Jen a line, Penelope a line. We will get back to you with the answers for sure. So I think we are just a little bit ahead of schedule. Let's see if we can start transitioning here. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hey, Evan, how are you?
I'm doing well. Sir, are you ready to start, or do you need us to dismiss for a quick break? Are you expecting anyone else to join you today?
I am ready to start. I am expecting Michael to join me. I believe Michael is in this room somewhere.
Wonderful.
And,
there he is.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. He's wearing a jacket.
I know.
Wow, I feel underdressed now.
I know. I got to go back now and put one on.
Gosh. Yeah, I'm ready whenever you tell me. I can I've got some slides here, and I can
if
share
you
my screen and the
sure, if you want to tee up your slides, I'll give you the full introduction system as well, because I can't do for one and not the other. So let's go ahead and segue into our report from the fine folks at DPLA. We're so glad that they're able to be with us today. And speaking with us today is, where's my list of people? Of course, we have John Bracken, the Executive Director of DPLA. Previously, John worked for nearly 2 decades as a philanthropic investor in digital media, media policy, and innovation. Prior to his work with DPLA, he most recently served as Vice President for Technology Innovation at the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, where he oversaw the Knight News Challenge, Knight's Prototype Fund, and other efforts to improve the creation, curation, and accessibility of information. With him today is Michael Delabita. He is the Director of Technology at DPLA. Michael has worked in software development and publications in the startup, library, and education space for nearly 20 years. Michael most recently served as a data and analytics developer, architect, and engineering manager at the marketing company Scribble Live. He also outdresses all of us today, and we will never let him forget that. I know.
What a show off.
I know. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John Bracken. John, take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Sorry not to be here in person, but such as it is. I'm sharing my screen. Is it coming through?
Looks good to me, John.
I still see my face. Okay. So I am particularly glad to be here because you've spent time with the people who really matter on the team. So I want to thank everyone for the invite and thank Shanae. Hopefully at least most of you were able to hear from Shanae and Audrey and Dominic earlier. And it's my job to sort of, I think, maybe capstone some of what you heard from them with a little bit of a sense of how we got here. Share with you a little bit about what we're thinking about as this year begins to draw to a close. Maybe, I think it's October, right? I don't know. And hand it over to Michael to sort of also summarize from a larger tech perspective what we're working on and where we're going. And I was really glad to hear the updates right now from Jen and Penelope, because I think that overlaps a lot with what we're talking about. So thanks again for having us. Thanks for all you're doing. And thanks to ODN for being such a key partner to us and for inviting us to be a part of this. So I'm going to do a quick time check so I make sure to give Michael his due. So I want to, before I get to those questions of where we are and where we're going, I want to go back a bit to our launch as an independent, small, little nonprofit in 2011. And you might have heard some of this earlier, but I really want to undergird some of these points that our mission at that moment in time in the previous decade was to expand the realm of openly available materials, make them more easily discovered, more widely usable, and used. And I think both the usability and the used attributes are things hopefully you've heard about today in terms of the Black women's suffrage work, in terms of the work we've been doing with Wikipedia and Wikimedia, and Michael will touch on those more. You know, more recently, last year, with the help of some of you, actually, we launched a strategic plan that centered our work around 3 primary areas. The first and the central pillar is the one that you've been hearing about from our team and actually throughout most of the day, which is the archival work, collaborative work that we do nationally. The second area that we work on is building out a library controlled platform and marketplace for ebooks and more with audiobooks. And I can touch on that at the end if there's time. And the third is, you know, be part of and organize conversations like this one, conversations like DPLA Fest. In the last 6 months, it's meant a lot of Zoom time. We've increased our Zoomage a lot to bring folks together to talk about what's happening in the field and what are things that are emerging that we should keep an eye on and lean into. And I think one of the things I wanted to highlight was when we came up with a draft of this strategic plan last year, one of the points of feedback we got was, that's nice, but you're missing something about how you do the work. What are you bringing to the table? And so that conversation with lots of our partners pushed us back to really think about what's our approach? What are our values in action look like? And we ended up really centering our work around 3 different areas of work. One, as you're hearing today, right, DPLA is a collaborative exercise in everything that we do. All 3 of those areas that I mentioned, we are not, we don't do anything on our own. We're not a solo operation. Everything is through collaboration. Second, you guys can still see it, right? I just got a message saying sharing is paused, but you can still see. Michael, I'm looking at your face. Can you still see my screen?
We can see your title slide.
Oh no. Did it just, is that all you've been seeing?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Maybe if you just reshare.
Okay. Let me. This whole time has been the title slide?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. All right. Share. All my pretty slides. Not. All right. What do you see now?
Just you.
Oh, geez. All right. I will try one more thing and then I'll just walk through and talk. Still just me?
Now it's just a big gray screen.
Huh.
I would like not maximize, just play it from Keynote, maybe.
That's what I'm doing. Well, let me just walk through because let me just keep going and I'll hand it over to you. So our three areas of value. So collaboration, optimism. The second one was really focusing on being optimistic about technology's possibility for improving the world and improving the way knowledge is shared and accessed. And the third was harkening down and really focusing on and articulating a need to more intentionally focus on equity and inclusion. And I want to talk through a little bit about what that meant to us then and how we've recentered around that in the last 6 months in particular. So in the strategic plan, we articulated a need. Now, this really would be nice to share. So. Nothing?
I think the problem is it's starting like a new window.
All right.
When you full screen it.
I'll just talk through it and then I'll hand it over to you. In our strategic plan, which you can see for yourself at strategy.dp.la, we talked about the importance of empowering institutions and communities historically marginalized and underserved and underrepresented from projects like ours. And the need to actively seek community leadership, strategic, balanced, and mutually beneficial partnerships in all that we do. And Penelope already touched on the idea statement, which was I think a step by the network, our network generally, with our participation to begin to put some meat behind that declaration. In addition, our board in June, we kind of doubled down on what that commitment means for us. They made this, underlined that projects like ours have often served, sometimes inadvertently, sometimes often intentionally, as instruments of oppression, colonialism, and white supremacy. And then it's incumbent upon us to ensure equitable access to information for all and contribute to a more equitable society. And I hope what you heard earlier today from Shanae and Audrey and Dominic was, and you'll hear more from Michael, is a little bit more direct manifestation of what that means, what that entails, what the walking is behind that talking. We know that we've got a lot of work to do to live up to the types of commitments that both exist in our mission and exist in these statements and declarations we've been making this year. And I think we're in a uniquely privileged position to take that work on, and as a small nonprofit with equitable access in our mission statement, and with both a board and a staff committed to that work, and with the progress and momentum we've made that you've heard from today, that work going forward and ensuring that we're making a real difference at this moment in American history is, I think, speaking from staff to the board to our founders to our larger community, is something that is front and center in how we're thinking about our work going forward. I guess the last thing I'll say before handing it over to Michael is I'll read to you the links for the 2 events we have coming up representative of that. And I'm sure you heard from it earlier today, but if you go to, and I'll share these in the chat, but at the end of the month, we have a workshop on from Black women's suffrage to Black Lives Matter that we're doing with Charlotte Mecklenburg Library. And next month, we're doing a virtual brown bag for our community that I think actually Michael's helping to lead up on discoverability. And so I'll make sure to save that information in the chat, and I will now turn it over to Michael, whose slides will be more useful than mine were.
I hope so. Only because I'm not entirely sure I'll be able to share the full screen, but let's try. Does that look right?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great. And if you see this red thing, just making sure I'm on the right one.
Zoomies, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so, oops. Oh God. It's always something.
So close.
Technology is hard is the summary of my presentation. Are you seeing it again?
I've seen the title slide, Michael.
Okay, great. All right, so I just wanted to touch briefly on some points about what we've been up to since 2019, when we were here last time and enjoyed cupcakes. And yeah, nothing much, nothing's going on. It's been pretty, no, not kidding, not for real. It's been crazy. And I guess I wanted to just take a second and acknowledge all the work that everybody in the room is doing to further our profession in light of kind of existential craziness from multiple different dimensions. Thanks a lot. But in terms of what that looks like at the DPLA level, you know, our item counts continue to increase year over year pretty dramatically. We're above 40 million, which is, you know, a new milestone. I think 5 years ago, we were actually, yeah, we weren't even at 10 5 years ago. So, you know, things are going great that way. The DPLA tech team has finished migrating to our new ingestion system, which means that our ability to reprocess the data, recover from mistakes, and kind of being able to enhance and update the data over the course of days or weeks is dramatically improved. And we're going to be starting to build some more reporting and data cleanup features based on this work. And it's just been kind of a huge load off our backs to have this going. It means that our ingestion system isn't something that several people have to run full time anymore, which is pretty amazing and is opening us up for new projects. One of the things we're looking at on that data front is cleaning up the right statements field. And I think the headline here is spelling counts. So I'm gonna just take a quick sec to do a little bit of a dive on that, because we were getting right statements from a lot of different folks, and that is great, but it turns out that there are ways to do a better job and make these really usable for machines as well as people. So I'm gonna show you what I mean here. So a right statement is URI, and a lot of people are familiar with URLs, and in particular, the behavior of URLs when they're in your browser. And a lot of times people try to map that reality back to URIs, and it doesn't quite work. So just think of a URI as like kind of an opaque string, something that you shouldn't really try to look into, that means something to the world of linked data. And so in this case, the right statement for no copyright United States looks exactly like this. And if you go to the rightstatements.org website, you can see down here, it's expressed the same URI for that. Now, the web page that this is showing isn't actually here. In fact, if you take this string and put it in a browser, you end up on this page, but that's somewhere else. Very confusing. It just, on the side, wanted to put a plug in for the rights portal that the Right Statements Working Group has brought up. There's a lot of resources there about right statements and implementing them. So to show you how things could go wrong, Like, for example, I'm just going to go through a few of these. This one starts with HTTPS. That's technically not correct. In the world of browsers, when you go to Google or Facebook, if you put HTTP, it'll probably redirect you to HTTPS. And in fact, if you type http writestatements.org, you get redirected there. But the thing that we want starts with HTTP. Likewise, this one has page in the path. That's for humans. The URI for computers in the world of linked data has vocab in it. Here we have a different domain name, and while that'll work fine in your browser, it's not quite the same thing for the world of linked data. And here there's a suffix telling us what the language of it is. That comes along a lot from people cutting and pasting from their URL bar. We, at one point, and I assume this is an automated script that just didn't have the rest of the stuff and just stuck writestatements.org in there. That's great that the website is findable, but that's not actually a write statement. Kind of reminds me of Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy. And sometimes we get humongous blobs of text with a write statement in it. And again, this isn't meant to be a free text field for humans. This is meant to be a linked data field. So we're really looking for that one string. Finally, sometimes people have put links to their institutional rights page, which is not one of the enumerated standard rights statements that we're looking for. So we are going to continue to talk about that whole issue as time wears on over the remainder of this year and next year, because we, this is a great initiative. It means that the content's reusable and findable based on its rights statement. And we want to build features around that and interact with the world in new ways based on this. So thanks for all your work on this front. Another project we worked on, which I'm sure you all know about, mostly because we talked about it earlier today, but also it seemed to make a splash, is the Black Women's Suffrage Project. And from a technical standpoint, we really feel that we made some strides towards automated curation and enhancing our API. Everything that's in Black Women's Suffrage gets tagged every week based on a complicated query that a number of folks worked on, and is available from our API under a tag. That's not a feature we've publicly made available yet, but we're thinking that a way of expanding our work might be to create thematic collections like this and let people query them based on their membership. So we lay the groundwork for that. And you heard about the Wikimedia project earlier today. We really find this is one way in which we can find new audiences out there on the web for the content that we all work with, and to drive use of not on dp.la or your website necessarily, but across the web in general. And when you go and make those steps towards those communities, I'm sure as you heard during that presentation, there's actually a lot of users out there. So we really feel like this is a positive move for us. Likewise, we're about to get started on an experiment with some of the folks from the Big Sky Hub. And the idea here is that they are temporarily going to give us full frame assets for some of their content, and we're going to see how that affects our ability to get ranked and to become ingested by Google and show up in Google's index. The working hypothesis here is that a full frame image is going to be recognized by Googlebot as more compelling content than a thumbnail. And so we're working together to see what that means, and if that's true, and what we should do next if that is. Meanwhile, we've been working to onboard new hubs. Obviously, that's been a little difficult given everything that's going on, but we have 5 hubs sort of waiting in the wings and moving towards turning on, which is really great news. I just moved to Rhode Island, so I'm really excited to see them come up. And I think we've spent a bunch of time responding to network concerns, things that have kind of showed up in the middle of other work streams. Most recently, we are working on hardening our thumbnail hosting infrastructure and annotating it so we can provide information back when the thumbnails don't show up correctly in DPLA about what the problem might be. And also we spent a bunch of time doing research and creating new technology around dealing with the problem of identifiers changing when systems downstream from us change. And I can talk about more of that later during Q&A if you're interested. So I think overall, I'm just going to use this as a little bit of a soapbox to talk about what new challenges for us technologically might be over the next year. First, I really see us focusing on impact, and you can kind of see that in the Wikimedia project and the VSCDM project. We are experimenting with new ways to make sure that we can get the attention of users that are interested in this content and make sure that we are showing up in front of them, whether that be on our site or on someone else's site. It really doesn't matter to us. We just want to make sure that this stuff gets used and enlightens the public. So I think the challenge here is for us to find the mix of solutions that are compatible with the web in terms of the way SEO works, the architecture of our pages work, the places that we go find to show up as a field, and kind of investing in platforms that bring audiences. And I think that that needs to be sort of a big tent of a variety of different approaches so that we can have the most impact possible. And second is equity. And equity, as you heard, is a top-level DPLA mission. And I kind of see this as a challenge because we haven't put work into this in the way that I think we need to yet. The existing network and aggregation, it won't create equity automatically. We need to put dedicated effort towards that. And I think part of the reason for that is that we've essentially, and you know, I know a lot of people are really under-resourced in this work, but if you come from an underrepresented minority group, you're probably even more under-resourced. And so in effect, we've built this aggregation from institutions with resources to spare. And our existing pool of content is largely based on, you know, dominant groups deciding what is of record. And we don't necessarily see people with their own self-determination talking about themselves as much as we'd like. So I think, how do we rebuild to create equity? I think that we need to lower barriers to entry with easier tools, workflows, and documentation, so that if we are taking steps towards the people that we want to include and create equity for. And I think that we need to build in flexibility to our systems to match the evolving descriptive practice, as you heard earlier, that, you know, we need to be able to constantly update things so that as things become more described correctly, that we are able to reflect that in the whole aggregation. We do have a couple of upcoming events, and as John mentioned, I'm going to bring back this slide, but first I just wanted to invite everybody to ask us any questions or you know, tell us what you're thinking.
Or send us cupcakes. That's
cupcakes are great too. And I think actually,
or adorable cat pictures,
pet photos. Yeah, so that would be great.
It's so funny. Shanae earlier mentioned chocolate Buckeyes, and so I feel bad that I can't provide cupcakes or chocolate Buckeyes to the group because that would be delicious. I was soliciting some questions in the chat box. I don't see any at this time, but I think that John DeWeese has it set up so that you can actually unmute yourself now. Is that right, John DeWeese?
Yes, it is. Anybody can talk or share their video as well, I believe.
So yes, so if you're feeling adventurous and want to vocalize your question instead of putting it into the chat, now is your time. Oh yes, Cindy Christoph, you're hungry. I'm hungry too. I see you.
If there are no questions, maybe we can get a tour of, you know, of people's home offices. And Evan, I'm looking at your lovely decor in your background.
Well, yes, my living room is
That's
it's
awesome.
something.
I like.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. It's quirky. No questions? Ah, come on, folks. Certainly, there's something on your mind.
I mean, I will. One of my last slides was sharing my contact information, because as you know, what it takes to sort of take on this challenge, this broader challenge of how we make sure to live up to commitments, is something, and how we build off the momentum of the projects you heard about earlier today and from Michael is front of mind for me, certainly. And so, as you know, anyway, there's my contact info is in the chat, and I anticipate sending out more intentional kind of provocations and requests for participation in as we begin to design the work going forward. But we know that sort of effectively executing on these commitments that we've made, and really doubling down on our mission of equitable access to knowledge, is going to mean changing some things about how we do our work. And we don't have a roadmap for that yet. And so would love your participation and growth. We want, you know, one of the strong feelings I think we felt as a staff and checking in with folks in our community is that the Black Women's Suffrage Project, for instance, is the type of momentum and connections that we want to do more of.
John and Michael, I don't know if you can see the chat or not. Question just came in saying, I know that discussion continues to pick up around a national finding aid network for archival collections. Does DPLA see a place for themselves in that conversation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because DPLA has traditionally dealt with objects at the item level and hasn't done a good job of even representing collections. So I think that is potentially a growth area for us. But in terms of the national finding aid effort, you know, I think that there's, if we're talking about the stuff that's happening out of California, I think that there's a desire not to recreate what DPLA has made. And so I think that there might be ways in which we can collaborate in terms of like, when things are more generally specified in finding aids, that we can provide searches or somehow like create on-ramps from the finding aids to DPLA aggregated content and potentially flag things in the other direction too. So I think that that's definitely a possibility. I don't have too much of a, I think that work for them is really being sort of figured out now. And I think that it's going to be a down the road thing to figure out how we can collaborate. But I think that putting this content in context is going to be a powerful tool to drive use, because in many cases you can find yourself in a totally decontextualized stream of content that's hard to sift through when you've gotten yourself up to the level of items that we have. And if you type in a single keyword search like food, you get really everything. So finding ways to contextualize the content and work with projects like that, I kind of see as similar to what we're already doing with Wikimedia. And I think it's important to drive use.
Michael, could that be a topic that might come up in your discoverability brown bag next month?
Yeah, could be.
Great, thanks for answering that, and thanks for asking that, John. Are there any other questions for John or Michael?
This is where you implement your 10-second rule, Evan? Did I just interrupt your 10-second countdown?
Yes. I'm restarting it because you did. No, I'm kidding. Oh,
it's like the space launch sequence. If anything interrupts it, you have to start over.
Right.
I did it, and then we got a question from Abigail.
We did, it
Yeah,
worked, it worked.
It worked. Yep, someone needed that extra 10 seconds. So the question came in, curious about how DPLA addresses accessibility.
I think, so we think it's important. And when the site was redesigned, I think we went over and beyond sort of the automated tools in the sense that we contracted with an external organization to get folks who have print disabilities and other disabilities to actually use the site using the tools that they use to get their work done. And we got feedback on that and implemented the changes that they suggested. And that was a learning experience for us across the board. I think it's really hard to get accessibility right. And I think that we always have room to grow. I think that in particular, we really didn't have the bandwidth to do that for the Black women's suffrage site. And so I think we are sort of kind of taking what we learned from the DPLA front end project and moving it over there. And so I think that it's ongoing work, and I can't say that I'm 100% happy with everything we've done, but I think personally, I think it's really important, and it's something we think about not only in web accessibility, but now we're starting to think about it in terms of like, we had someone come in and do captions for the first webinar for the Black Women's Suffrage Project. And I thought that was fantastic. So I think, you know, we're learning as we go, as a lot of people are. And I think that it's a worthy place to put work. And I hope we continue to do that work in the future. Is there a specific question I can answer? Or was that kind of what you were looking for?
Abigail, did you want to drill down any further into accessibility, or was that all right? She's typing a follow-up.
Yeah, I think that that's a really important thing to work towards. And I think that I see folks working in access in libraries and finding a lot of pushback from sort of entrenched ways of doing things in the institutions they're embedded in. And I think that that's just another example of how sometimes, while no one's intentionally trying to prevent access to these resources for folks that are disabled, that by not proactively doing the work, you are actually part of the problem. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us to actively work towards making our resources more accessible. And that means, you know, educating yourself. It means setting aside time to build things that are accessible as part of the design process.
Any other questions for Michael or John? Okay, I did the 10 seconds. Everyone's had a chance to share what they want to share. John very kindly shared his contact information. You have ours, of course. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us in Ohio, our friends at DPLA on the national level. We'll get back to you and answer whatever questions you might have. Thank you, Michael and John, for being with us today and sharing the updates of what's going on at DPLA. That's great. We always are appreciative of you giving of your time. Before I throw it back to Jen and Penelope for final goodbyes, there's just a few kind of housekeeping things that I want to go over with everyone who attended live today. Just again, a hearty thank you for giving of almost an entire day. You got a bonus 30 minutes back, maybe that you weren't anticipating. So hopefully you'll do wonderful things with that extra half hour. As I'm sure you're aware, events like this don't just happen on their own. So again, I want to shout out the ODN team here locally, Jen Johnson, Penelope Shoemaker, Peter Kukla, Wendy Knapp. We've all been working for weeks and months to put this together and find speakers that can speak to some of the projects that are happening on a local, state, and a national level, and hopefully you found them interesting. To that end, you will be getting an evaluation or a survey, however you want to phrase it. We always like to know what you liked about events such as this, and we want to know what you didn't like as well. We'd love to hear ideas for future events, future speakers, topics that you'd like to see covered. We're all ears. So please take the time to fill that out, whether or not you're filling it out because you attended live or because you are viewing this after the fact. I would be remiss if I didn't shout out our speakers again one more time. Holly from Spelman, thank you so much for kicking off the event today. Our friends at DPLA, Dom, Shanae, Audrey, John, Michael, John DeWeese at Toledo Lucas County Public Library. Thank you so much for your tech help, your expertise, for presenting today, for hosting the Zoom. You're basically the MVP of this event. We couldn't have done it without you, so thank you. Thank you to IMLS, who gives us the money through LSTA funds. So yay, hooray for them, allowing us to put on events such as these. So I think that's about it for my thank yous and housekeeping. Jen, Penelope, do you have anything you want to add before we say final goodbyes?
Yeah, I had a slide deck, but I was having technical difficulties,
Oh,
but
no.
I think I can get it up now.
Yay.
Only because my entire internet kicked out. But now we're back up, so it's fine. Okay, so just to reiterate what you had said, Evan, I just had a slide to thank everybody in print.
You mean I didn't have to memorize it all?
No,
oh
you didn't, no. Yeah, thanks to DPLA ×2 for their speakers and support today, and also, you know, for creating the entire project that we're participating in. And, you know, we are here because of everybody who's here today. We're here because of your work and your history and the work that you do in your collections and really your community. Even if your collections aren't aren't a part of ODN or DPLA yet, you know, you have patrons and users in your communities who are interested in local history, American history, world history, cultural heritage, and that's why we're here today. So thank you so much for caring about that and your support of that. And then speaking of what you were leading to, Evan, right? This is our survey just for the day, a couple questions from IMLS for you to answer and a couple questions for us. Obviously, the virtual format was new for us this year. Last year was our very first ODN Fest, and this is our very first virtual ODN Fest. So who knows what year 3 will bring, but whatever you want, we want to bring it to you. So you can fill that out. I'll also be sending out an email. We'll send out a follow-up email with the link in case you have any post-conference thoughts. And I think that was it for these particular slides. Anything else for you, Evan, or Peter, or Penelope? I'm not counting to 10.
I'm good.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Penelope.
I was going to say I just really appreciate everybody coming, but Evan might have said the same thing, so. I'm done.
Well, stick a fork in this conference then. It's done.
There we go.
Thank you all so much. And we'll hope to meet and speak with you soon and work with you on the rest of this project and our upcoming projects for 2021.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.